You're listening to the weekly Parsha Podcast with Ari Goldwag, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Ramat Beit Shemesh, Israel 5783, 2023. This week's Parsha is Parsha Tzav, and the Torah continues with its description and with its commandment about the korbanos, about the sacrifices that were brought in the Mishkan and which will be soon brought in our Beis Hamikdash, in our holy temple in Jerusalem. And there's a very interesting discussion in the Medrash, which I'd like to share with you. And it flows into an even more interesting discussion that has to do with each and every one of us. We're going to start off talking about korbanos, and we're going to end off talking about what it has to do with us. Because korbanos, the sacrifices, when we speak about them, they seem to be something very distant from us. Interestingly, I just saw an advertisement that on Sunday, this coming Sunday, near the Kotel, they're going to have a display. They're going to have real Kohanim come in real Bigdei Kahuna, in real garments, and practice what it looks like to bring a Korban Pesach, to bring a Paschal Lamb. There'll be many rabbis there, etc. But it's hard for us to relate to that. I'd like to go on Sunday to see this with my own eyes. It's hard for us to relate to it and hard for us to understand what it means, what's a korban, how does it apply to us. But let's see what the Medrash says. It starts off telling us about a machlokes, an argument between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina that has to do with something fundamental. I'm not going to get so much into the concept of, this basic concept, but a little bit we'll touch on. Shelamim, Olah. There's two different kinds of korbanos. There are a few different kinds, but two main kinds. An Olah is a completely burnt sacrifice. It is placed on the altar. Everything was burnt. A Shelamim was a different kind of korban, which is actually the Korban Pesach. In many ways, is very similar to a Shelamim. Korban Shelamim was brought. Part of it was brought on the Mizbech, on the altar, and part of it was eaten either by Kohanim, or in the case of Korban Pesach, it was eaten by the owners of the animal. Now the question is, we find that there were korbanos that were brought before the Torah was given. We find that Noach brought korbanos, he brought sacrifices. Adam HaRishon, our sages say, brought sacrifices. Avram Avinu, Yitzchak, Yaakov. The sacrifices that were brought before, were they only oilas? Were they only completely burnt offerings? Or were those who came before the Torah, was it a new concept, the concept of Shelamim, or was it something that existed before, that you could have a sacrifice, you offer part of it to God, and you take part of the animal for yourself? So this issue is a machlokes. It's an argument between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. Rabbi Elazar Amar Shelamim mikruv b'nei Noach. Rabbi Elazar says that indeed a korban Shelamim was something that was brought, could have been brought before the times of the Torah. The Torah is telling us a new concept, the Korban Shelamim, that's part of it is brought by the Kohanim onto the altar for God, and part of it is eaten by the owner. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina says no, that before the Torah was given, there was only a completely burnt offering. That was the only thing that was brought as a sacrifice to Hashem. There was no Shelamim. Shelamim is a new idea the Torah was machadish. It's a novel idea that the Torah brings, that there's such a thing as bringing something to Hashem and taking part of it for yourself. Now, the Medrash goes through a number of different proofs this way or that way, trying to prove that Rabbi Elazar is right, that Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina is right. I'm not going to read them all because I really want to get to the end of the Medrash. There's a long piece in the Medrash. So I'm going to skip to one of the proofs. V'dam esayelei Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. Says the Medrash, I'd like to prove that Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina is correct. That indeed, before the Torah, there were only korban oilos. There was only sacrifices that were completely burnt. How do I know? So, there's a pasuk in Shir HaShirim, in Song of Songs, chapter 4, verse 16. Uri tzafon uvayi teman. Awaken, O north, and come to the south. Or, come those from Teman. Teman is the name of a place, Yemen, or it could also be a reference to the south. In this Medrash, we're going to understand it as a reference to the south. Uri tzafon zoy oila shenishchata b'tzafon. Says the Medrash, when it says, awaken, O north, It's a reference to a carbon oilah. A carbon oilah, the sacrifice which was completely burnt, was something which was slaughtered in the north, in the northern part above. Well, if you're looking at a map of the Beis Hamikdash, so it looks like it's above the Mizbeach. It's north of the Mizbeach, of the altar. Now says the Medrash, why does it say awaken, O north, awaken, O Olah, O completely burnt sacrifice? It's something that existed before, predated the Torah, and we're reawakening this concept of making such an offering to Hashem. So that's why he says Uri Tzafon, Uvoyi Teman, and come, O south. What's this a reference to? Zaytoida shenishchata b'darim. This is a reference to the carbon toida, a thanks offering, which is a Shelamim, which is this kind of offering, which part of it is brought for Hashem and part of it is eaten by the owner. Zaytoida shenishchata b'darim. The thanks offering is sacrificed in the south. What does it say? Oh, and come, as opposed to awaken. Davar shu chidush. Because this is a new thing. This is a new concept of carbon shlamim. So this is like Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, this verse, or this understanding of the verse. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said that shlamim didn't exist before the giving of the Torah. That's this pasuk. Very interesting pasuk. We're going to see more about this pasuk soon. V'av kroya Messiah Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. I have another verse. This verse is in Vayikra, in Leviticus chapter 6, verse 2. Which I think is our Parsha. It says in the verse, this is the law of the Olah, it is the Olah. What does it mean? What is it? It's the known Olah. It's the known completely burnt sacrifice. Why do we know it from before? Because it's something that was brought indeed by the children of Noach previously, before the Torah was given. What does it say in regards to the carbon shlamim? It says, this is the Torah, these are the laws of the sacrifice of the shlamim. Asher krivu l'Hashem. Ein ksiv kan, l'asher yakrivu l'Hashem. It doesn't say the shlamim that was brought to Hashem. It says the carbon that will be brought to Hashem. So what does that teach us? Mikan ulaba. It means that it's something that's a new thing. It's a new concept. So the Medrash is saying these two verses prove that Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina is correct, that Shlamim was not something, this sacrifice which was for the Mizbech and also for the owners, was not something that existed before the Torah. Now the Medrash says, Ma Mekayim Rabbi Elazar L'Kraya, the Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. Rabbi Elazar said that they did have Korbanos Shlamim before, they did have this dual purpose sacrifice before. So how does he understand these verses? So he says like this. Urit Safain, L'chishi Yisayra Agalius, and as soon as with Safain, Yavoyu V'yachanu B'doraim. The pasuk, this pasuk in Shir Hashim, in Song of Songs, according to Rabbi Elazar, and we could say that even according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, it's more the simple understanding of the verses, so it's not a contradiction. What is this pasuk referring to? It's referring to the fact that when the Goliaths, when the exiles who are found in the north, they are awakened, they will come and they will encamp in the south. South is a reference to the land of Israel, right? Shenamar hineni maybe oisam me'eretz Safar, and the pasuk says in Jeremiah chapter 31 verse 7, I am bringing them from a northerly land. So they will come, right? Where the word Tzafon, which means north, also means tzafun. We also find what tzafun means hidden, right? The Jewish people, as long as we are inside of exile, as long as we're outside of the land of Israel, we are hidden, right? We don't have a true identity as a nation when we're outside of Israel, right? As we come to Israel, we gain our identity. Klal Yisrael, we are called Klal Yisrael, the people of Israel. Where is the country of the people of Israel? It's the land of Israel. As long as we are outside of Israel, we are in Gullus, we're in exile, and we don't have that identity. We're tzafun, we're hidden. Hashem says, I'm bringing them back from that land of hiddenness, and I'm bringing them to the south, so to speak. the land of Israel. And it's important to point out here, I'd like to point out, that in deeper thought, in the deeper, the Machshavas form, the books that speak of deeper thought. So, what is the concept of right? What is the concept of left? What is the concept of north? What is the concept of south? These concepts are connected. The word Safon, which means north, so we're facing east. We're always facing east, right? That's the classic direction Jews face, not just because we're facing to the land of Israel from the west, because most of us are in the west. Many of us, I shouldn't say most of us. Many of us are in the west, right? People in South Africa are facing north. But classically we face east. So now when we speak about north and south, when you're facing east, so north is to the left, south is to the right, right? So south is connected intimately with the concept of the right, which is chesed, the concept of kindness, of God's beneficence being open and clear. The left is connected to gevura. The left hand has to do with the concept of gevura, withholding kindness, the concept of God being hidden, right? So that's the tzafon, the north. Tzafun. Also find the Gemara says that, it's a Gemara in Sukkah, that it refers to the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination in a human being, as the tzafoni. Hashem promises us, tzafoni archik mimchem. Hashem promises that when Moshiach comes, when the Messiah arrives, he will distance the Yetzer Hara from us. The Yetzer Hara won't have any power anymore. The evil inclination won't have power over us anymore. Our egos will be diminished with the advent of the Messianic age. Hashem is saying, I'm going to bring you from the north, from the place where my hand is hidden, the left side, and I'm going to bring you to the south, to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel, where it's a place of chesed. My hand is more openly apparent, right? God's eyes are upon this land from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. There's much more hashgacha pratis, open divine providence. Okay, so this pasuk is talking about the return of the Jewish people from the north, from the hidden place to the south. And I would say, bringing it back to the carbon Shelamim and the carbon Olah, right? These two different types of korbanos, these sacrifices. We said that the carbon Olah, which is a completely burnt sacrifice, it's in the north. That's related to the north. The north is the gevura. It's where we don't see ourselves in a relationship with Hashem. It's all Hashem, which is a certain level, which is an awesome level. But a carbon shlamim is a taida. This thanks offering is the carbon pesach. It's about a relationship. We are being formed as a nation with carbon pesach, with the Passover sacrifice. It's the first mitzvah that the Jewish people perform as a nation. We are coming into a relationship with Hashem with the carbon pesach, with the carbon taida. We're thanking Hashem for having saved me, for having saved us from some kind of difficult event. So the Korban Shlamim is in the south. It can be brought in the south. It's on the right side. It's on the place of chesed. It's on the place of love and connection. As opposed to Korban Olah, which denotes more of a separation from Hashem. It's only in the north. Okay, so that's the concepts of north, south, concept of Olah, Shlamim, and the concept of coming out of Gullus, coming out of exile, is leaving the north, leaving the hiddenness, leaving the place where God's hand is not as apparent, and coming to a place, the south, which is Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, where God's hand is much more apparent, much more open. Says the Medrash, Magog. The Medrash continues. When Gog will be awakened, Tanas Matzaf, and where is Gog? Gog, we know there's a concept of Gog and Magog, the war of Armageddon, before Moshiach comes, before the Messiah arrives. So there's a great war, which according to the Chavetz Chaim, we already saw the first two installments in World War I and World War II, and there's another installment, so to speak, that's going to come, according to the Chavetz Chaim. Right? So the war of Gog and Magog, where does he come from? He comes from the north. What does it mean he comes from the north? He comes from the side of Gevurah. He comes from the side of hiddenness, where you don't see Hashem. Yava v'yipol b'darim. He comes and he falls in the south. He falls in the land of Israel. The Psukim say, the verses in Ezekiel say, so he comes, the king of Gog, the king of Magog, which is Gog, he comes and he's awakened from the northern place and he comes to the southern place. He comes to the land of Israel. He dies in Israel. He's buried in Israel, the Psukim tell us. But in concept, what it means is there's a war which begins with tremendous destruction and tremendous amount of hiddenness of Hashem. And it culminates, it finishes with a revelation of Hashem. We could say that when the Jewish people received back the land of Israel in 1948, received back Yerushalayim in 1967, that's the South. That's the revelation of Hashem. It's a culmination of that war. 48 certainly is a culmination of the results of that war. The First World War, the Second World War. We could talk about this at length, but I'm not going to get into it. Right? There's a revelation in the South. Melech HaMashiach shenosam b'tzafon yavo v'yivne beis hamikdash shenosam adorim. The King Moshiach, he's in the north as well. He starts off in the north. He starts off in a hidden place. He comes and he builds the Beis Hamikdash, which is in the south. What does it mean in the south? What does it mean the Beis Hamikdash is in the south? Says the Heilige Eitz Yosef, because the portion of Judah is in the south part of Eretz Yisrael. Right? If you look at a map of Israel, so there's the north, there's the south. Towards the south is the whole, if you look at a map, an ancient map of the portions of the tribes where they were, the Beis Hamikdash is in the south. The Beis Hamikdash is in this portion of Judah, which is in the south. Okay. So he's going to come from the north, a hidden place, to the south, a revealed place. I awaken from the north. And he comes from the east. Okay. Alright, so now let's come to the end of this medrash and really connect it to us and what this means for us. I'm Rabbi Yossi b'shem Rabbi Binyamin bar Levi. Rabbi Yossi in the name of Rabbi Binyamin, the son of Levi, says like this: Lefi shaboilam hazeh bezman sheruach dremis min hasheves ein ruach tzfeinis min hasheves. Bezman sheruach tzfeinis min hasheves ein ruach dremis min hasheves. He says an incredible thing. He says we have a concept of a northerly wind and a southerly wind. As the Mephoshim explained, connected to what we've been talking about with north and south, what they represent as far as Gevura and Chesed, as far as a hidden aspect of Hashem versus an open, revealed, loving aspect of Hashem. There's a northerly wind which represents the hidden aspect, and when that blows, when there's a northerly wind blowing, you can't have a southerly wind blowing. You can't have these two winds blowing at the same time. Right? A wind blowing from this direction, you can't have another wind coming from the other direction. It's just not possible. And what it means for us, as the Mephoshim explain here, it means that when there's a hanhaga, when Hashem interacts with the world, with gevura, with withholding His revelation, you can't see the other wind, which is the hanhaga, where Hashem reveals Himself. And when Hashem reveals Himself, it precludes the other hanhaga, the other way of God dealing with the world, which is hiding Himself. You can't have both at the same time. In the future, before Moshiach comes, or maybe when Moshiach comes, God says, I'm going to reveal two winds at the same moment, at the same time. And these two winds, a northerly wind and a southerly wind, a wind that shows my hiddenness and a wind that shows my revelation, they will both happen at the same moment. This is what it means. I will say to the north, meaning the northerly wind. This is a pasuk in Yeshaya, in Isaiah chapter 43, verse 6. I will say to the northerly wind, give, go. And the southerly wind, al tichloi, don't hold yourself back. Bring my children back from far away, and my daughters from the edges of the earth. So there'll be two winds. There's two ways, I would say, that Hashem brings us back to the land of Israel. One way is with Gevurah, with a hidden hand, We get kicked out of a country. The Arab world has kicked out all of its Jews. We endure terrible pogroms and holocausts in Europe, and we are pushed out into the land of Israel. That's one way that we come back. That's the hidden hand. That's the northerly wind. But then there's a southerly wind, a wind of love, a korban Shelamim of Taida, which says Eretz Yisrael is building beautifully. It's so awesome. It's such an awesome place to live. It's such a spiritual place. It's developing. It's growing. The spiritual aspect of the land of Israel is getting stronger and stronger with each passing day. It's calling. It's calling to all of our children outside of Israel. Come back. Return to me. Return to the land. So you have a northerly wind and a southerly wind. You have that wind of chesed, of kindness. Come back to Eretz Yisrael. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, limdatcha Torah derech Eretz. Says Rabbi Yochanan a very important thing, and this comes down to which wind do we want to be brought back to Eretz Yisrael with? How do we want to come back to the land of Israel? Rabbi Yochanan says that the Torah says derech Eretz. There's a certain way it's supposed to be. She'ein chasan nichnas lechuppah. And this is a mashal, this is an analogy. A chasan. A guy who's getting married, right? He's marrying his wife. He doesn't walk into the chuppah, ela im kein noisenes le'kal rishus. He turns to his soon-to-be wife, he turns to his fiancée, and he says, may I enter the chuppah? And understand, what is a chuppah? It's the wedding canopy. So the chuppah is really their home. It's a representation of the home. That area needs to be owned by the chassan when he marries her. It's a space which they will join together and they will become one. They will get married, right? Chassan turns to his fiancée, his soon-to-be wife, and he says to her, may I enter our future home? And she says, yes, you may. That's how it's supposed to be. We are the Kala, so to speak. We, the Jewish people, are the bride of God. And Hashem turns to us and says, may I enter our home? May I enter the Eretz Yisrael? May I enter the land of Israel? May I enter the Yerushalayim, Jerusalem? May I enter the Har HaBayis? May I enter my home, the Beis HaMikdash, where we're going to be wed? Hashem turns to us and asks us this question, and we, as it were, give Him permission. We, as it were, and what does that look like? We're going to find out in a moment. This is what it says in Shir HaShirim. In this very verse, chapter 4, verse 16, that talks about, awake in the north, come to the south. This is Klal Yisrael speaking to Hashem and us saying, please let my beloved man come to his garden and eat from the fruits of the produce. Please, Hashem, we show that we want Hashem to come here. And then the pasuk says, I, which is the man speaking, which is Hashem speaking, I came to my garden, my dear sister, my wife. Hashem speaks to us and says, oh, you've given me permission, as it were. Klal Yisrael needs to give God permission, as it were, to come into the palace, to come into Eretz Yisrael. What does that mean? What is this measure saying? It's saying an unbelievable thing. It's saying such an important thing that we don't think about, that we don't realize. We all have been trained to believe. We've been raised to believe. It's been drilled into our heads that Moshiach comes, Messiah arrives, and then we all come back. This message is telling us something very different. The message is telling us that we need to show Hashem that we really want Moshiach, that we really want Him to come back, that we really want Beis HaMikdash. We can't wait. We can't wait for Him to arrive and then we come. Hashem turns to us like a chasen, saying, do you want me, may I go in? And well, we're supposed to say, yes, please come in. But how do we say that? How do we say that? How do we say, Hashem, we want Moshiach now? Is that how we say it? That's not how we say it. Words are not so meaningful. They have some meaning, but they're not very meaningful. We want Moshiach now is a very nice thing, but it doesn't say it like action. When I live in Eretz Yisrael, when I come to Yerushalayim, when I come to the holy places of Jerusalem, and I show Hashem, I really want you here. I want you to come back here. Hashem is waiting for us to say that. Yavai Daidi Legani is waiting for us to say, please Hashem, return. Not just with words, but with actions. This is such an essential idea. This is so foundational. And it's something that we don't think about, we don't realize. Kadosh Baruch Hu wants us to initiate. Hashem wants us to show that we want Beis HaMikdash, that we want Korbanos, that we want relationship, because that's what the sacrifices are about. The word Korban means a sacrifice, means a Korban, means to come close, means to have a relationship. It's about the Shelamim. According to one opinion, that's the Chiddush of the Torah. The Torah says, I want the Shelamim. Hashem says, I want this relationship. I want a Korban Pesach. I want a Korban Toida. I want this relationship with you, Am Yisrael. But you need to initiate it. You need to ask for it. You need to ask for it for real. It can't just be words. We can't fool ourselves. And we can't fool Hashem. Words are nice, but action is what's required. Do we want to be blown in on a northerly wind, or do we want to be blown in on a southerly wind? Hashem invites us to come in on a southerly wind. He wants us, Uri Tzav and come back. Come back. If it's this way or that way, you're going to see both things happening at the same time. But Hashem says, invite me in. Come. Invite me in. I want to bless you and ask you to bless me. Hashem should help us that we should be able to indeed be in His ire, to be awakened by a southerly wind, to be awakened by a wind of love, to return, to be ready, to be willing, to be blown back to Eretz Yisrael, to show Hashem, to invite Hashem in, back to Eretz Yisrael, back into Yerushalayim, back into Beis HaMikdash, into the Holy Temple. Hashem should help us to be zeicha, to merit, to see, indeed, that incredible revelation of Hashem speedily and in our days. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.